Okay, welcome back. It's the day after the off-year election. We're going to talk about that with Webster, Griffin, Tarpley this hour. A quick analysis for you. The results, according to most pundits, or many of them at least, seemingly ensure the Republican Party feud will play on. For deeply divided Republicans, yesterday's elections in New Jersey and Virginia did very, very little to resolve the fighting between hardline conservatives and the establishment pragmatists who rightly worry the party is drifting too far to the right to win any statewide and national elections of any significance. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, the lean, mean Chris Christie, congratulations to him and everyone who's trying to lose weight, by the way. His easy re-election in a mostly Democratic state was an emphatic signal of the continuing appeal of Republicans who talk about reaching across party lines. It also solidified Christie as an early favorite in the race for the 2016 Republican U.S. presidential nomination. Now, in Virginia, closer than expected race. Barely winning was Democrat Terry McAuliffe, which was interesting. I'm not sure what this means in the long run, but we'll see. Webster, welcome back. How do you see it all?
Hello, Jeff. That was quite a load of stuff you had there.
That's from Reuters. Don't blame me.
British intelligence. That's the British intelligence.
Has been for, 100 years?
That's Reuters, right? They're,
yeah.
You know, they're contiguous with the empire.
What is it? MI6?
And all that.
Yeah.
Just even in terms of the terminology, to understand anything. The modern Republican Party has no conservatives of any consequence. There are none. You have right-wing radicals, extremists, reactionaries. And one way to understand the current fight is you have a group of traditional reactionaries, like McCain or Lindsey Graham.
McCain is a nutcase. He's not a reactionary.
Well, they're reactionaries and warmongers.
Yeah.
And then you have this other group, which I would have to call fascist, because they say, bust all unions, deregulate everything, let's have child labor, bring it on, let's go back to the Middle Ages, let's go back to the Dark Ages.
Where would you plant Chris Christie?
Let's, I suppose we better start talking about him. He is, of course, a thug, a bully, and a gangster, and I would say one of the crimes of Obama is to make him great. In other words, Obama used Christie used Obama a year ago.
Hurricane Sandy.
The outcome of that
That's right.
Storm, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
The Democrats have essentially given this thug a free ride, and we're only now hearing there's this book which has just come out, the so-called Double Down book by Heilemann and Halperin, two NBC News characters, and they go through the reasons why Romney rejected Christie as a possible vice presidential running mate.
All right.
And one of them turns out was that Christie, this great paragon of U.S. attorney, tough prosecutor, he was a running dog for Bernie Madoff. He worked if Christie worked.
He was?
Yeah, he was a running dog. He was a lobbyist for Bernie Madoff.
Yeah, very few people know this.
No, but it's it just shows you how non-existent the Democratic Party is on many of these issues. Let me just go through it. This was in New Jersey specifically. There was a question: would financial fraud be subject to the purview of some kind of a consumer watchdog agency, sort of what you have on the federal level now, right? The new one, consumer finance, whatever it is. So they needed a lobbyist, I guess now in Trenton, to go there and say, no, don't interfere with our wonderful business, free market. And this was done by an association of securities dealers or of investment company bigwigs. And sure enough, Bernie Madoff was the president of that company, of that association. Sorry, he was the elected, I guess, serving president of it, and he hired Christie. And then there's other stuff. I haven't been able to get that book because it's expensive, and I'm waiting for the for the paperback
the trade paper
edition to come out. But he's got all kinds. He's guilty of malfeasance as a U.S. attorney, gold-plated expense account, flying everywhere, first class, eating, obviously. Here are the main things now with Christie, and some of them you'd expect, right? He is, of course, a union buster. There's nothing moderate about him. He's got, in common with Mussolini and Hitler, he's got that one ruling passion: destroy every union you can find. And, of course, since the public sector unions are the strong ones, he wants to destroy the teachers' union. So his first year or two in office were essentially under the shadow of his attempt to bust the teachers' union. And unfortunately, given the power of the Democratic Party over these poor, pathetic teachers' unionists, right, Mandy Weingarten and her unfortunate, bedraggled group, the teachers' union was unable to fight back. I'm thinking of what the nurses did to Schwarzenegger in California. They dogged his every step. He didn't get to show his ugly face anywhere without a group of nurses being there to pelt him and to expose him.
They did go after him, yeah.
Christie never got that treatment. So he tried to break the teachers' union. The other thing we just had is a wretched increase in the minimum wage, right, in New Jersey. New Jersey is a very expensive place because the real estate tax is through the roof, and automobile insurance costs more than I've ever heard of any place in the universe. But it's extremely expensive. So they wanted to have, I think the minimum wage was supposed to go to $8.25 an hour. And
that high. That's in the stratosphere. You need oxygen to live on that. Right? Wow. $8.25. All right.
Yeah, it's communism, of course. But that went through the legislature in Trenton. Christie vetoed it. And on the same night that he's elected, he presides over one of the ballot questions was, should this minimum wage be raised? And it was 60-40, yes. Repudiate Christie. Raise the minimum wage. Okay, so these are things any reactionary Republican you'd expect, right? He's going to try to bust unions. He's a wage gouger. This pretty much comes with the territory.
Let me ask you,
the big one, the really big one, the tunnel under the Hudson River. Now, this is a place where even the most wretched Republican should be able to say, yeah, let's get that tunnel built. Let's get all that, those jobs that I can control, right? Let's start getting tolls. Let's get economic activity, right? Because the tunnels under the Hudson River essentially are approaching 100 years old now, and they're a terrible.
Well, the whole infrastructure is rotting.
The federal money was there to a very large extent, and Christie said no. In other words, it was like the feds were going to give $10 billion, and Christie.
Why did he say no?
Because he's a damn reactionary, right? Because he wanted to curry favor with these damn reactionary Tea Party saboteurs, right? Remember, the Republican Party is the party of national sabotage. Don't have any question about it. They're rooting against the United States. They hate the United States. Every failure of this government, right? If we were losing battles, they'd love it, right? Because they could blame that on Obama, right? If the shuttle were crashing, that would be Christmas time for them. In other words, their whole mindset is frankly anti-American, and for all the wrong reasons, in the worst way. So this is Christie. Now, how did he succeed in getting reelected? Well, part of it is the idea that the Democratic Party was told to back off because Obama said, "Look, I've been hugging him, right? I want to use him as my bipartisan fig leaf."
Yeah, but there was a recent falling out between the two.
Yeah, fine, but by that time the damage had been done. In other words, the image that was impressed on the people in the Garden State was the rotund Christie cavorting with Obama hugging in the wake of the hurricane, and that was it. That's the
I'll never forget. I saw it. I don't know how. I just happened to be watching, and wow. All right.
There's another very important point, though, the way he rigged the election.
Okay. Well, that's a machine state in New Jersey, so let's find out more from Webster in just a minute. And I want to point all of you, please, to the top of headlines at Rense.com. Pastor James David Manning has come up with a major coup He found a high school buddy of the young, homosexual, crack-smoking, pathological liar, Barry Soetoro, to come on his program, and I've got the video up there for you. I want you to look at this. And you too, Webster, if you get a chance, by all means.
I think he says he considered himself a foreigner.
Yeah,
that's all well and good.
Oh, you take a look at that. It's a hell of a hard-hitting piece. Okay, back in just a couple. Hang on. Okay, let's get back to Webster. All right.
So listen, Jeff, I just wanted to make one or 2 points before I forget them, okay? So
sure.
I make sure I wanted to call people's attention to my lecture on the Russian fleets of 1863, right? The Russian fleets coming to New York September 24th and the one to San Francisco on October 12th. This was the turning point for the U.S. Civil War in terms of international affairs. And this is what prevented the British and the French from attacking Lincoln and the Union. And it was not their humanitarian scruples or anything of the sort. Now, this was broadcast 3 times on C-SPAN, about 10 days ago. So it's been put on TV. But right now it's a question of the most watched recent programs. And if you go to C-SPAN,
nice.
Right, and in the middle of the page it says Video Library or Video Archive. Mm-hmm. You go to the Video Library, and then you scroll down a little bit, you'll see most watched. You click on that. I think they come in groups of 6, so by the time we get to the second group of 6, you should see me there with Russia's participation in the American Civil War. Why don't you, look at that, click on it, watch it. If you haven't seen it, please do watch it. Because the goal is, right now, I am the most popular program on C-SPAN 3 in the last 10 days or 2 weeks. And I think it means that if that continues, that this would be a candidate to be rebroadcast. And this is an urgent matter. Yeah. There is a Brand X study by a guy called Perrino, and Perrino's book is called Lincoln in the World, and it is I'm afraid it's a rather, what can we say, a rather sloppy cover-up of the role of Russia, which the people in the establishment find very, very embarrassing, right? That the great British and French were your enemies, Alexander II demonized by the British and by the Kennan family and so forth. He was your best.
You're going to have to elaborate for our listeners a little bit on what viable power the Russians could project into this American Civil War.
They had the biggest land armies. And remember, in the Napoleonic Wars, the Russian land army had come all the way to Paris, which it occupied for quite a while, right? Mm-hmm. The French term bistrot. Yeah. Bistrot is a Russian word meaning bistra, meaning fast. And it was the Russians would come piling into these Parisian cafes, and they'd say, "We want service fast, bistra, bistra." And this caught on, and that's where we get the famous Parisian bistro, which is the cafe, and it's also the guy who runs it. So the deterrent power of Russia was immense, because they could launch these armies. They could also launch a land army into India, and this was the one place where the Royal Navy could not protect the empire, because you're in the middle of this landlocked subcontinent, right? Coming through the Khyber Pass,
sure.
The areas that are so fought over today. Anyway, this is pretty much covered in the speech. So please do take a look. It's on C-SPAN. Go there, click on it, and maybe I can get it broadcast again, which would be good again, because the darkness, the shadows of ignorance, and unfortunately of willful obfuscation. This is very, very thick. The other thing I wanted to do before we'll get back to Christie in a minute. The big event yesterday was, of course, the Tax Wall Street Party, right? And this is my friend Randy Credico, who was running for mayor, this time as a third party, right? A minor party, right?
Got
not
it.
Republican, not Democrat. Yeah. He had been, because of the wonderful laws of New York, there's no sore loser law. He was in the Democratic primary on September 10th. He got about 12,000 votes. That ain't hay. And this time around, he got fewer votes. He got about 650 to 700 votes. But in that, he outdistanced 5 minor parties. There were 5 people on the ballot with fewer votes than Credico, and he just about tied the Socialist Workers' Party, right? And the Socialist Workers' Party has been there for about 75, 80 years. I don't know, since Trotsky and the Fourth International or whatever it is. So that's not a bad result at all. And the important thing now is there is something on the map, which is the Tax Wall Street Party. And his program was quite simply tax Wall Street turnover. Not their profits, although you'll tax those too, hopefully, but they're buying and selling. They're flash trading, program trading, high-frequency trading, right? The turnover, right? Buying and selling. Put a 0.5% tax on that at the level of New York City, and then you'll have enough money to make the city college system free, as it was during the whole Depression, right? Well, it turns out all the neocons went there. That's where they all got their start. But it means anybody, right, coming up. You could provide free health care, a free Medicare buy-in for everybody in the city. This actually came up. The fact that Credico was there pushed de Blasio to the left. It even pushed, what's his name there, the narcissistic congressman, right?
I can't
the guy who would send his pictures of himself. Anyway, he was forced to offer a program of free health care. So free college, free health care, stop foreclosures, an extremely developed, advanced, enlightened program of how to make the financier oligarchs pay for rebuilding the city, right? Because New York has been crushed by the dictatorship of finance capital, certainly in the last 20 years under Giuliani, and then 3 terms of Bloomberg, right? 3 terms of Bloomberg's absolute dictatorship, right? The social structure in New York City is now approaching third world, right? It's like, well, it's 2 classes. You could see this coming decades ago. There's an elite, right? Snorting cocaine in the penthouses, and then there's the mass, and the mass is systematically crushed and exploited, and you got to do something about that. And the only way to do it is a shift of resources back out of Wall Street and into the middle-class neighborhoods of the city, right? Brooklyn, Queens. Do something about the tremendous poverty in Harlem and Bed-Stuyvesant and all these other things. Anyway, it's an exemplary effort carried out by Credico, and what it means now is the Tax Wall Street Party is the model. I hope very much it'll be the hegemonic model as we go into 2014 and above all 2015, because I think we can conclude that a large mass strike upsurge is coming. Right? As I think I went through this with you a while ago, right? When
we did. Yep.
New York City in earlier June, I pointed out 7 years into a world depression, you get the possibility of an upsurge, right? From 1929 to 1936. 1936 was the big year of general strikes in France and Spain and the creation of the UAW in the United States. So 2008 to 2015. This is what we got to get ready for. And with Credico, we now have the Tax Wall Street Party. This is, established. It's on the map, right? We laid down a marker. The banner has been planted, and people who want to do something serious know where to come. Come to the Tax Wall Street Party.
Yeah, indeed. All right. Where's that Tarpley tax? Was that on any ballot this time?
Well, it was essentially this one. And, of course, he was blacked out, right? The media, they had, multiple debates.
Yeah.
He was excluded.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Stand by. We shall continue with Webster. Okay, and back with Webster. Okay, were you in mid-thought there?
Mid-thought on Christie. Let's just go back to Christie, and then maybe we'll go back to New York City. I'll jump around a little bit. With Christie, how did he get this large margin of victory over this hapless woman, State Senator Barbara Buono? Obviously, because the Obama people decided, to lay off. Right? They wouldn't give money to embarrass their wonderful bipartisan friend, right?
Right.
This was terrible. But here's the thing. There was a Senate election in New Jersey, which happened to have been held about 2 weeks ago, right? 2 weeks ago, pretty much to the day. This was that Senator Lautenberg had died in office, and Christie said, all right, we're going to have a by-election, right? We're going to have a special election to elect a new senator. And that was the one that Cory Booker just won, right? Cory Booker, the black mayor of Newark, New Jersey, right? Now, you have to figure, if the governor election and the Senate election had been held yesterday on the same day, the entire black community that came out for Cory Booker would have been there, and they would have voted for the Democrat, Buono, right? And a bunch of other minorities and basically the entire Democratic base. They wanted to go and get Booker elected because they knew they could, but of course with Christie it was going to be much harder. But if those elections had been scheduled on the same night, that would have put Christie in a much grimmer light, because he's presided over very high unemployment, big deficits, downgrades of New Jersey's bond rating, all this other stuff, right? In other words, he really is a lot of hot air. He's a thug, right? He's a bully. He somehow tries to overpower people, right? He threatens women, threatens unionists, right? Very rude, uncouth kind of character.
Yeah, but I think we get the idea.
If we had any normal election, it wouldn't have been 60-40. It would have been something much closer. All right, so there's that. Now, crossing the Hudson to New York City. Let's look now at de Blasio, right? The progressive alternative.
Oh yeah.
This Credico did some yeoman service, and the Tax Wall Street Party did some yeoman service in pointing out what a fake de Blasio is. First of all, who pays him? Well, he's got the endorsement of George Soros. I think, pretty sure he's got money from Soros. He's got money from Morgan Stanley. He's got money from Goldman Sachs. He's the financial community writ large. In other words, this is very similar to Obama, except that Obama ran as this, neoliberal, bipartisan, post-racial. In the case of de Blasio, it's got at this sort of demagogic veneer, right, that he's against, he wants to somehow make the fat cats pay. We delve a little bit into his family. It's again like Obama. It's a CIA family. Unbelievable. His uncle was a CIA man who worked with and on the Shah of Iran. And his uncle was a co-author of a book with the Shah of Iran, or he ghost-wrote a book with the Shah of Iran. And there's every indication that de Blasio's own father was also from the Central Intelligence Agency. He does this big, multi-ethnic, melting pot trip with he's got a black wife. He himself, supposedly Italian, of course, but he's not. His real name is Warren Wilhelm. And we had some fun putting up that Credico's family was from Molise, right, from Campobasso. So there was a real Italian link, right, with this Warren Wilhelm, a.k.a. de Blasio. This was not so strong. Now, in terms of the policy, what do we get with de Blasio? It's essentially a leftist veneer on continued austerity. One thing that he wants to do, he says he wants to have a tax on wealthy people to pay for pre-kindergarten. But unfortunately, the way he's going to draw the tax, a lot of the people who are, they spend like 6 months out of the year in New York, they're going to be able to escape the tax. So it's not a very, it's not a measure that has any teeth. And the other thing he wants to do is to gentrify various neighborhoods and have one or two fairly cheap housing units, but the rest of it is all completely gentrified and completely upscale and completely for the wealthy. And it's pathetic, right? It's tokenism. In reality, what he's going to do, he had a meeting with the business community on Wall Street, de Blasio, and he said to them, please, I want you to know I'm a fiscal conservative. You shouldn't worry about me. Underneath it all, I'm a fiscal conservative. So I think that indicates the austerity regime. The other thing is stop and frisk, right? This outrageous policy where the cops
unbelievable.
Stop everybody all the time, but if you're black, you have 5 times the chances. If you read his statements closely, de Blasio's, he never promised to end stop and frisk. He just said, I'm going to reform it. I'm going to take off the rough edges. I'm going to tone it down. It's a complete fraud. So it's just a question of how long it will be before the people of New York realize that they've been duped. And this time they were duped.
Oh, had they?
By the limousine liberals, the Learjet liberals, right? The people like Katrina vanden Heuvel from her CIA family, right? Her father, of course, was the right-hand man to Wild Bill Donovan at the OSS, right? That's the Nation. That's what stands for left.
Well, that's
OSS.
For those who don't know, was preceded. That was the genesis of the CIA. They called it the OSS first. Came out of World War II.
Created by the British, created by Sir William Stevenson, the man called Intrepid, and the British Security Coordination. But now, in spite of all of this, Jeff, we have to step back and look at the long waves. This is a substantial left turn for the U.S., what I've just described. And to that extent, it is hopeful. There are perspectives that this opens up.
Well, that's interesting.
You look at Christie, right? I've just gone through the fact that from any normal historical standard, he's a reactionary, union buster, wage gouger. He's even worse because he won't build the tunnel, right, when the money is actually there.
That's a mind-blowing.
But from the inside the Republican Party, he's supposed to be a moderate. In other words, he's not the Tea Party. And the Tea Party hates him. If you happen to listen to Limbaugh or Hannity today, they hate Christie. They spent their whole programs tearing him down.
Really?
Because they say he's not fascist enough.
So who are they pushing?
Oh, they like Cruz, of course.
Come on.
Cruz is their man.
Embarrassing. Well, we haven't gotten to mention little Rand Paul yet. Maybe we can do that when we come
we'll
back.
Get him too.
All right.
He's part of the picture.
And don't forget the Oscar Mayer hot dog man, Representative Paul Ryan. He's still lurking around there. Okay. And Marco, too. Back in a minute. Hold on.
They're in eclipse.
Now, let's hope. Okay, and back to Webster. We get to talk about Little Rand here a little bit. Go ahead.
We're going to get to Little Rand in just a second, but just now the framework. This is a marked left shift, and it corresponds to the fact that the Tea Party was defeated everywhere. Everywhere important, Tea Party was routed. And the entire political axis has shifted now some degrees to the left. Take New York City. This is the first time in 20 years that this godforsaken Democratic Party manages to elect somebody mayor, because we had 2 terms of Giuliani and then 3 terms of Bloomberg, right, meaning Wall Street dictatorship, right?
Please.
Horrendous stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so now we've got the Fabians. Now we've had the brutes, now we got the fakers. The question is, how fast do we use up the left cover of these fakers and then get rid of them? Let's go to Virginia. In Virginia, the governorship of Virginia was won by the party that did not control the White House since 1973, since Nixon, right? So 40 years, whatever party had the White House, the other party was going to win the governorship of Virginia, and it failed this time. McAuliffe has broken through that. So what it shows is this is a time of tectonic shifts, and I believe it has the potential and the promise to destroy the Republican Party in place and then go on to split the Democrats into a plutocratic or Wall Street component and then a pro-labor or populist component. And that's the perspective that I have been working off. Now, if we look at Virginia, right? Now, McAuliffe obviously is a rogue, right? McAuliffe is a kind of a picaresque bandit. Some likable qualities, but
a picaresque bandit. No, that's
a picaresque bandit.
That's a great construction. I haven't heard that for years.
He does it with a smile, right? He's like a highwayman who laughs when he robs you.
He's a happy bandit. Okay, all right.
Cuccinelli.
Leave him
Cuccinelli. This is very sinister, right? Because this guy is a social bigot. He's a brute. He's fascistoid, pretty much in the extreme. So he's a social bigot, social conservative. His appeal is the so-called Christian fundamentalist. I don't know how these people think they have anything to do with Christianity. I'll never figure out. But they are, reactionary. Just one example, right? The regime that he was part of was the one that told women, if you want an abortion, you got to have a transvaginal ultrasound, meaning a probe stuck in. Yeah, you didn't follow it. A transvaginal ultrasound was going to be required as the precondition for an abortion. The current governor of Virginia, Bob McDonnell, is known as Transvaginal Bob, and he was going to be a vice presidential candidate.
And that's
he destroyed
there's a little human there. All right,
he destroyed himself. I'm sorry, he's gone. But Cuccinelli was trying to go all the way. Ken Cuccinelli, big reactionary, and he failed. And he fell short, right? McAuliffe defeated him. So this is indeed a landmark. Now let's see what this points to. This is where we get into this question of what's happening with the Republican Party. As you know, right, we've done this in the past over even 4 or 5 years. We're in these party cycles, right? There was a party cycle 1932 to 1968. That was the New Deal cycle. That was when the U.S. reached high points of economic development, world power, and so forth. Since then, though, we had the Southern Strategy cycle, right, the 1968 to 2008. This was the rule of Southerners, racists, veterans, old people, Christian fundamentalists, white men, rural, small-town people, neoconservatives, and so forth, right? This was destroyed by Bush and the Iraq War and by the Depression, indeed, in 2008. So since 2008, we're in the process of assembling a new party cycle, right? Some of the obvious data are that the Hispanics are going to be big, the Asians are going to be big, the red states are getting fewer, right? Virginia is purple, Georgia is purple, the Southwest is up for grabs, all these other things. But specifically, inside the Republican Party, look at the components, because this is what you see with this Cuccinelli candidacy. You've got the money people, right? In the Republican Party, Republican Party wouldn't be itself without the money. So we have the legions of greed, right? Wall Street and people like this. But then, in order to get the numbers, they got to bring in the social bigots, and this is why they need these issues, right? Abortion, contraception, gay rights that they have to be opposed to. This is rube bait. You can't get the rubes, right? The hicks, the hayseeds, to come out for, long live Wall Street greed. No, they won't do that. But they'll come out for no abortions, stop the gays, and all this other stuff. Then you've got a third component, the neocons, right? The warmongers, right? We've seen them at work with Bush and Cheney and so forth. But then there's the fourth component, the libertarians, starting as the stoners, right? The people who want narcotics. But then this anarchist stuff that we've just seen with the government shutdown, right? We hate the government, smash the state, down with the government, repeal laws, right? Paralyze, go bankrupt, right? Extreme stuff. Now, the problem that this poses for the Republican Party is what you see with Cuccinelli. Cuccinelli is a social bigot, first, last, and always. He tried to pretend he was interested in jobs, but it didn't really fool anybody. The greed boys, right, the money men, are very uncomfortable with Cuccinelli. There were all kinds of big money interests in Northern Virginia who wouldn't give money to Cuccinelli. They said, look, I'm not going to give you money because you make this state. I can't get people to come and work for me if they have to live in Virginia under this reign of terror of transvaginal ultrasounds and all the rest of the stuff that he wanted to impose. So he was simply denied, right? The people that gave money to McDonnell last time, they wouldn't give money to Cuccinelli. It also works on the national level. So the primary contradiction is that the legions of greed are profoundly fed up with the social bigots. They say, you should spend more time busting unions, and you should spend more time getting deregulation and cutting my taxes, and instead you're off with your transvaginal nonsense, right? There's also a big fight between the legions of greed and the libertarians, right, the anarchists, because the legions of greed say, we like these arrangements the way they are. We don't want to default, right? We want to keep making money with the Treasury. We're not going to touch, the Federal Reserve or any of this other stuff. And instead, the libertarians, of course, want to tear all this down. So do you see what it is? The Republican Party is blowing itself apart. That's the Republican Civil War that you've just mentioned. And I would say, based on the first 24 hours post-election, this is going to increase. In other words, the money men, the legions of greed, are more and more resentful of the social bigots on the one hand and the libertarian, anarchist, anti-government group on the other. So again, four parts of the Republican Party, and they're blowing themselves apart. The neocons, the warmongers, they have really less and less to say, right? Nobody seems to want them, and they were never key to winning elections, right? The winning elections was a combination of the money men with the social bigots, right, to turn out the rubes. But then the libertarians began to grow. But as soon as the libertarians became numerous, they began advancing their own crazy demands. So where does all this leave us? Just in a nutshell, that speech I gave in New York back in June, right? We're headed towards an upsurge in 2015. Now, surprise, surprise, other people know this, right? I'm reading here from the New Statesman of London, right? Sort of ultra-left British City of London financiers. And they say, quote, a larger scale version of the Occupy Wall Street movement will begin by the end of 2014, indicating that social unrest will start to foster political debate. Now, this is attributed to a group called Gartner. It's an IT consultancy. And how does this come out? It's that British, what can we say? The British establishment wants to market a new leader. Do you remember Daniel Cohn-Bendit of the French May? Yeah?
No.
No, he was Danny the Red. He was the leader of the anti-de Gaulle, street fighters of May 1968. He's now a respected NATO asset in the European Parliament. Anyway, they have a new guy, right? And it's not Assange, it's not Snowden, it builds on them, but it's this character, Russell Brand. I trust you've heard of him? Russell Brand.
Yeah. He's in the news. He's a
news,
kind of a hot.
Right?
Got sizzle and pop. Yeah, right.
He has just published a 4,500-word revolutionary manifesto in the pages of the New Statesman of London, and he basically says, if you want to be a revolutionary, don't vote. He wants it to be an anarchist. He wants the total immediate consciousness revolution. He wants the imagination and power. In other words, all this anarchist claptrap. And if you look at him and you look at the slogans, you start smelling the Situationist International. Once again, the people who wrecked Occupy the first time around. So
the fifth International.
No, this is not. This is the Situationists.
Okay. All right. Well, let me ask you. We don't have a lot of time. Russell Brand is a kook indulging his ego. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah, him. Exactly. I would call it a narcissist, utopian, anarchist freak show.
Very good. All right.
That's him. But
I need some pieces up there that spell this out. So I'll be working on that.
He's the revolutionary leader recommended by the New Statesman in the City of London.
Amazing It's amazing there would be any resonance with that kind of. You call it right? It's claptrap.
But, they can put money behind it. But the idea is,
well, he's getting exposure.
The pattern of wrecking. They want to wreck. In other words, they don't want to lead the upsurge. They want to wreck it, as Occupy already did.
That's what I've been hearing.
We're talking counterinsurgency.
All right.
So that's it in a nutshell.
Very good. All right.
We'll
good
see
summation.
You soon.
Thank you. You take
Bye-bye.
care of yourself. Good night.
Bye-bye.
16, Republican U.S. presidential nomination. Now, in Virginia, closer than expected race. Barely winning was Democrat Terry McAuliffe, which was interesting. I'm not sure what this means in the long run, but we'll see. Webster, welcome back. How do you see it all?
Hello, Jeff. That was quite a load of stuff you had there.
That's from Reuters. Don't blame me.
British intelligence. That's the British intelligence.
Has been for, 100 years?
That's Reuters, right? They're,
yeah.
They're contiguous with the empire.
What is it? MI6?
And all that.
Yeah.
Just even in terms of the terminology, to understand anything. The modern Republican Party has no conservatives of any consequence. There are none. You have right-wing radicals, extremists, reactionaries. And one way to understand the current fight is you have a group of traditional reactionaries, like...
Okay, welcome back. It's the day after the off-year election. We're going to talk about that with Webster Griffin Tarpley this hour. A quick analysis for you. The results, according to most pundits, or many of them at least, seemingly ensure the Republican Party feud will play on. For deeply divided Republicans, yesterday's elections in New Jersey and Virginia did very, very little to resolve the fighting between hardline conservatives and the establishment pragmatists who rightly worry the party is drifting too far to the right to win any statewide and national elections of any significance. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, the lean, mean Chris Christie, congratulations to him and everyone who's trying to lose weight, by the way. His easy re-election in a mostly Democratic state was an emphatic signal of the continuing appeal of Republicans who talk about reaching across party lines. It also solidified Christie as an early favorite in the race for the 20s.
News characters, and they go through the reasons why Romney rejected Christie as a possible vice presidential running mate.
All right.
And one of them turns out was that Christie, this great paragon of U.S. attorney, tough prosecutor, he was a running dog for Bernie Madoff. He worked, if Christie worked...
He was?
Yeah, he was a running dog. He was a lobbyist for Bernie Madoff.
Nah, very few people know this.
No, but it's, it just shows you how non-existent the Democratic Party is on many of these issues. Let me just go through it. This was, in New Jersey specifically, there was a question, would financial fraud be subject to the purview of some kind of a consumer watchdog agency, sort of what you have on the federal level now, right? The new one, consumer finance, whatever it is. So they needed a lobbyist, I guess now in Trenton, to go there and say, no, don't interfere with our wonderful business, free market. And this was done by an association of securities dealers or of investment company bigwigs. And sure enough, Bernie Madoff was the president of that company, of that association. Sorry, he was the elected, I guess, serving president of it, and he hired Christie. And then there's other stuff. I haven't been able to get that book because it's expensive, and I'm waiting for the paperback,
the trade paper
edition to come out. But he's got all kinds. He's guilty of malfeasance as a U.S. attorney, gold-plated expense account, flying everywhere, first class, eating, obviously. Here are the main things now with Christie, and some of them you'd expect, right? He is, of course, a union buster. There's nothing moderate about him. He's got, in common with Mussolini and Hitler, he's got that one ruling passion: destroy every union you can find. And McCain or Lindsey Graham.
McCain is a nutcase. He's not a reactionary.
Well, they're reactionaries and warmongers.
Yeah.
And then you have this other group, which I would have to call fascist, because they say, bust all unions, deregulate everything.
Yeah.
Let's have child labor. Bring it on. Let's go back to the Middle Ages. Let's go back to the Dark Ages.
Where would you plant Chris Christie?
Let's. I suppose we better start talking about him. He is, of course, a thug, a bully, and a gangster. And I would say one of the crimes of Obama is to make him great. In other words, Obama used Christie used Obama a year ago.
Hurricane Sandy.
The outcome of that.
That's right.
Storm, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
The Democrats have essentially given this thug a free ride, and we're only now hearing there's this book which has just come out, the so-called Double Down book by Heilemann and Halperin, two